Absolutely.
All right. So go ahead. This is what we're going to talk about first today. So
Perfect. I think so. Yeah, John's sent you guys the
this,
written description that
yes.
we had, and in the I don't remember. I think it was content managers group. Yeah. So originally we had a request from some clinicians to represent the combination of an HPV and liquid cytology test, in which so we use SNOMED in one of the health regions in Norway. We use it to register problems, points of care, nursing, etc. We use NPU for lab,
Mhm.
um, but the correlation between SNOMED and testing is also kind of intertwined with ICD-10 for us. It might be the case for others as well, but the Z codes specifically have some areas to register what tests have been taken at a clinician's office or in a unit in the hospitals. And these codes are billable and sometimes not very specific, which is a problem in the terminology. So the clinicians would like to be somewhat precise and say that they've done a test that might test for HPV, might be then further tested for cytology to look for precancerous cells. And that leaves me stumped as to where to begin expressing that maybe situation because they the clinicians themselves are a bit hesitant to use the word cytology. So just explain or representing the concept as liquid cytology has been taken or has been a sample using liquid cytology has been uh, gathered from the patient is something that they kind of feel isn't really what they want to express because it doesn't necessarily get sent to cytology. Because our national guidelines right now, they were updated last year or the year before, I think, are currently reflecting that when such a sample such as this is taken, you first test for presence of HPV virus, and if it's not there, then you don't send it to cytology at all. Um, and this is the case with this is the most prevalent use of such a test where you can gather cells and use it for multiple purposes. But my lab colleagues have informed me that this is probably going to be more widespread for other quite common tests as well, looking forward in time. So we want to solve this particular problem, but like in the sense of um, the correct placement in the terminology. How can we represent both the laboratory part of it, but also a test that is taken for multiple purposes, in which historically the name of the test itself, liquid cytology, uh, is a bit outdated, perhaps, because it's not only used for cytology anymore. That felt very like all over the place that description, but I hope you guys like understand what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, we do. And Andrea, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, it seems like, for the meaning of these codes and what you're trying to convey, there's two different aspects here. There's the testing that's historically performed in cytology laboratory sections. Um, and then there's actually, the kind of definition of the scientific study of the structure, function, and chemistry of the cells, cytopathology, cytology. And typically cytology is when you're having cells in fluid, which from pap smears and like the HPV testing, You're taking either like a brush, and especially if you're doing like liquid cytology methods, you're looking at a liquid as opposed to just the cells on the brush that don't involve liquid per se. It might be more akin to like tissue, like if you're doing like a cervical biopsy, that sort of thing that goes to pathology. So I think, the key is that you want to convey that, yes, this is going to be done like from a liquid-based analysis, which would be what cytology is, no matter where it's performed. The other aspect of it is HPV testing is pretty specific, not always from cervical, genital type specimens, because it can be oral as well. But it's something that's usually, 80-20 rule, 80% of the time. It is associated with pap smears, reflex. I put an example order from LabCorp, and I try to use examples because Kathy's from LabCorp, of, a pap smear that reflexes to HPV testing. Now, we know that uh, the nucleic acid testing could technically be performed in any area of the laboratory. Some might put it more in microbiology, some might have its own molecular genetics area. But when you're doing the testing, the methodology doesn't change if you're using the same cobas analyzer, for example, as listed in LabCorp, to the testing. So I think there's, a couple different aspects here. So I mean, yeah, I think it is liquid-based cytology. The other thing is I appreciate too you mentioning it's used for billing. So we don't use these codes for billing in the US at all. So that I know that's a country difference. And in we use Lincoln, use the NPC, um, the codes. But I think the important part is that it needs to have the appropriate level of granularity to specify exactly what's going on, what you're trying to describe. And then one other aspect I'll mention too is an HL7 cow clinical orders workflow. We haven't quite gotten into like reflex orders yet, but would it be a possibility that you have an order and it has a reflex? So, if the criteria are not met, you just do the pap smear and you don't do the HPV testing. I don't know exactly with your clinical guidelines in Norway. For us in the US, most of the time they will actually do the HPV testing automatically now just to catch any HPV cases before, it can contribute to cancer and other things. Um, if it's more of a total reflex where it's just dependent on those criteria, our regulations in the US require that the order naming convention, and it's clear to the clinician when they're ordering that it could reflex if conditions warrant. If they don't run a reflex, they would have a separate order that doesn't reflex. And then from a LIS build and EHR build, typically there's that top level order that's like the parent, and then there's a child reflex order. So you could separate them out as two separate terms, two separate orders, because then the clinician, if they truly wanted the HPV testing and it didn't reflex, they could order that separately. So then it just matters, are they getting the combined test with with a reflex order, or is it something where they're ordering separately the HPV and the pap smear, if they want to add on the HPV to the pap specimen, depending on what comes back from the report, that sort of thing. So I think there's, a couple different workflow aspects. And it might be easier too if you have like the separate terms for a reflex because they are two distinctly different tests, if you will. But I'll pause there.
Thank you. I'm writing like crazy, trying to take note of everything you're saying.
And I can
Um,
repeat, and I know Ricky, you're recording, so
Mhm.
yeah, I can watch it back. It's great. It's yeah, I think covering both of those cases would be of interest to us because we don't, as far as I know, the implementation in that region specifically that asked for this concept or these concepts does not include the testing and results as separate entities because the lab registers in a different code system than the clinicians that either order or actually perform the tests. And I'm still not sure how I can, because the question about cytology is, will it still count as a cytology if you're not looking for cancerous cells, particularly if it's more of a DNA sample of the or a DNA analysis of the HPV virus type, which is what we usually do. They screen for at least 8 different common types that can lead to cervical cancer. I'm not sure if my biggest problem is that I don't want to create a concept that's so general that it doesn't really tell you anything. But also, with the kind of hesitancies that these clinicians have come forward with, it's hard to be too specific because they really react to the cytology aspect, and they also want to be in a perfect world, they would like it to be an either or, an HPV and or cytology test, which is like a big no-no for SNOMED. So I can't really deliver on that. But the reflex testing, I've noted it down. I'm gonna go back to the original requester and ask for some input, how they feel about that.
Yeah, John has his hand up and Nancy joined us. So hi, Nancy.
I
We
am,
dove right in.
yes, I'm sorry. I was in another meeting and um,
That's okay.
got delayed.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Henny. Um, can we isolate down a little bit? Are we specifically looking for the concept to be in the procedure hierarchy or in the observable entities hierarchy?
So initially, I'm thinking procedure because of there's still somewhat of a need to connect it to ICD-10, which means we would have to have a procedure that then is the target for a procedure with a specific context.
Hmm.
That this procedure has been performed, that it is done, or in some time in the past, or which is it's not great because the procedure is always done in some way. And our
Hmm.
biggest problem here is that they don't allow us to connect the procedures to ICD-10 codes because
Hmm.
ICD-10 is diagnostics or diagnoses and classes of diagnoses. So we've kind of had this emergency solution for that to create situations for the things that don't fit it and kind of stuffed it all in there.
So are you trying to map to ICD-10 or ICD-10 PCS, their ICD-10
Um,
procedure codes?
no, just 10, and that's the main problem. I
That's
just
the
have to
problem.
really, yeah, 2 seconds. So sorry, my
That's
doorbell
okay.
is going off.
I mean, I was looking in the Loink ontology, and it looks like they did carry the words with reflex across from Loink into the Loink ontology. Um, so that's a possible wording combination that might be useful here. Um, Sorry, Henny, I when you stepped away, I was just bringing everybody, Ricky and Andrea, up to speed that Loink, when they created the Loink ontology which is the SNOMED representation, it looks like they did carry the word reflex or with reflex across into their naming structure. Um, so I would probably have to talk to Stan a little bit more about whether they're going to continue that. Um, the other part with the cytology part, I know one of the regrets that Stan had and probably Clem as well was adding the method in as one of the defining axes in Loink, and keeping that out of the naming structure. And that to what extent, I guess, and I'm leaving this open to Ricky and Andrea and the other true laboratorians here, since I only play one on TV. Um, is what degree of granularity do you need to have represented for the method as part of the concept?
And what do you mean, which of the two tests? Because there's two separate tests involved there, the HPV and the, pap smear.
Well, if the single concept is the presence with reflex to the second cytology, I guess that would apply to both because we know the system or basically the specimen substance going to be the same for both of
Right,
them.
right, right. It's in the shared specimen.
Hmm.
But they're two separate tests. They are, they usually go through two separate FDA 510(k) approvals. They're just kind of combined for more like a physician convenience order. That's where a lot of reflexes. So the physician has to go back. You get one and you have to go back and add on, later at a later
Hmm.
point from a patient care perspective. Um, and so, if it is something like a thin prep or Robin chimed in too from AMP about Sure Prep is another brand. And I don't know if those brands are used in Norway or if you have other brands, but those are like the liquid-based cytology for the pap smear that are automated. So you probably want to distinguish that you're using some of those that are automated versus not, just like you would for a CBC, manual diff or auto diff, those types of things. So there's distinctions and details. But then the HPV testing, it looks like from LabCorp, they're using the nucleic acid amplification. And I know now with the link release that came out yesterday, and the changes for Europe, that they've changed the methodology where there wasn't one to MolGen. And the idea is that in Europe that they want to post-coordinate this, which gets into another layer of granularity and complication too. Um, so there are going to be some for any PCR molecular genetics test, there's going to be distinct methodologies, and that's something that's important because it impacts the sensitivity and specificity in clinical interpretation and use. And of course, from a terminology perspective, the computerized meaning of said test. And then if you're using it for billing, it also implicate, for billing, because I don't know if you guys have different reimbursement rates or other implications in Norway based
Hmm.
on the different methodologies, because molecular testing tends to be pretty expensive, especially that's a huge issue in the US too, from the
Hmm.
top
Andrea,
But
CMS.
but
So
it
there's a whole
sounds,
bunch of things tied into that. But
right, and I agree with you about having the detail at the resultable. My question is though we're talking about the orderable, and do we need to have that level of granularity for the clinician at time of order? Does the clinician care what the method is when they order one test with a reflex? If they don't, then carrying that detail as part of the observable response back is appropriate because I agree with you. We need that detail at the resultable. I don't know that we need it at the orderable.
well, fair enough. So here's the question is, do you have two tests that are reflex that have different methodologies that are utilized for either the HPV testing, the pap smears, because they may, if they're only contracted with a single lab, or across the country, if you're sending these to a single lab and there's only one way of doing it, then your point holds, John. But if there's
Mhm.
different ways that it's being done and the clinician decides upon order entry, then they will need to know those details.
hmm.
But is the clinician going to know in all cases the two different methods and the difference in interpretation in order to make that differentiation when actually placing the order?
Clinical knowledge is a different issue, and that's up to the
Mhm.
clinician to get in their medical training. And there's no control, and there's an issue with that globally with lab testing. So let's
No,
Yeah,
solve
there's
that
definitely
problem.
an issue with that.
yeah,
Just to put it bluntly. But
no, I know,
when
and
you
I'm
are
being
required
facetious.
when you're required to list the two tests distinctly as two separate items, then you're going to have to name them differently because you can't name them the same thing. And so how do you make those distinctions from a
But
SNOMED?
it's sounded like Hannah's problem is that it's a single order.
It is. was a single order, and as you pointed out, John, I think I'm pretty positive actually that the clinicians that order it don't necessarily know which specific test is being performed on the sample that they acquire from the patient.
So you do
At the
not
time they
distinguish at
order it.
all? Oh, sorry. You don't
What?
distinguish any of the HPV markers, and you'll just have something that's like pap smear liquid with HPV testing, and there's no distinction as to which HPV markers, because that's a combinatorial explosion. There's hundreds of link codes with the different HPV markers too.
I think the order is general, but the national guidelines that the labs use as well are quite precise. So they say which DNA testing is to be done, and it is a thin prep PCR that is the
Okay.
I think I'm guessing it's like 98% will be the thin prep PCR. We have central test labs throughout the country that get the test, especially from the national screening program, but also the follow-ups will go there, and we do have some traditional pap smears for specific patient groups, but that's really being phased out.
So
Um,
is there a means to just call it something very high level, like pre-cancer screening or something, and not even
yeah, or even like something as general as specimen collection from us cervix, like even so unspecific that it's really not. It's kind of useful, but you don't really know what's going to be done to that sample when it's received at the lab. So the order is specific enough for the lab because they use NPU, and NPU will tell them like which level to test for and what the types of HPV virus to try to detect and so on. But for the order, or not, it's not even the order, it's just the doctors to get reimbursement for performing that procedure. They have to say that I've done this. They just have to register
so
that.
so yeah, so maybe just call it, thin prep specimen collection or something. So
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe.
NPU?
Sorry.
What's the NPU?
NPU is it's a lab. I think they call it an
It's
ontology, so it's the
Yeah.
equivalent of link in
Yeah,
Europe.
it's the Scandinavian version of Link,
Yeah,
Okay, all
sort of,
right. But
quote
I'm looking at
unquote. It's
mine
it's
while
not
you're,
exactly the same, but it's comparable.
yeah.
It's
looking at our directory of services you were talking about, and we have different tests to test for different HPVs. It's
right.
not all the same. And I see more liquid based than thin prep. So I'm not sure how you would know what's getting tested if you just had a generic order code.
Yeah, I found a
Yeah,
generic link that kind of describes the cytology and the high risk HPV testing for the genotypes, the 101822-5. So it kind of shows the structure where you have the subpanels and kind of how it's structured, and then you can select to John's point, the specific details as to which HPV tests are being done.
This
that's really
one? Oh,
interesting.
the other one. This one.
Yes, the other one, the 1018
There you go.
101822-5. Yes, thank you.
Right.
So, from this type of name, and this is a newer link code. But you have the panel, and so you have the cytology portion, which is the 18500-9, which would be kind of the equivalent if you're doing your, cervical bicytostain with a thin prep method, as opposed to a manual method, a manual cytology. So that gets into the order aspects. But then also you have the genotype panel, and in this case you have a bunch of high risk HPV. And so those are listed, and then you have the individual results of each of those, which ones will be positive. And it looks like there's a couple of combination, like the 33 and 58, that's a single marker test result. So it gets complex with these too.
But I think this is perhaps the level that we are looking for. And I feel good about the panel, the word panel, because that's something that will be familiar to the clinicians as well. And it's gonna cover if we can, yeah, if we can describe a panel as covering the genotyping as well as cytology where needed somehow.
If you're just ordering that high level, how do you know which one of those below it's going to use? Because they had different things that were being done for each one.
For the specific testing, the lab will get an order that's more precise based on the national guidelines. But the clinician might be a primary care practitioner that doesn't really concern themselves with what type of analysis is going to happen, other than they know it's going to follow the screening program, which means they have to take a specific kind of sample in a specific kind of way and send it to a lab and say that I did this test on this patient. Now you do your thing based on the screening program, so that it's kind of that knowledge is implicit as long as they say that this is a result of the screening test for the specific um, cervical cancer program. As
In the
far as
US,
Yeah,
we're not going to be able
I
to use
Right.
that in the US. It's going to have to be different. We're going to have to know which specific one is wanted.
definitely different in the US. But back to, the suggestion to maybe just have the physician document that they did the specimen collection, for the liquid specimen. And that makes total sense to me to be in the procedure hierarchy more than um I can't spell, but um than the test order for the lab test, because to me lab tests aren't procedures. But that's a whole
yeah,
nother
That's an issue
that's a
we're
different
kind of
topic.
having
whole
here.
nother conversation. But
Yeah.
but the specimen collection procedure, that to me, is makes sense to be in the procedure hierarchy. So that's the other choice, to create a concept that says cervical specimen collection in liquid, whatever we call this, sorry, uh, uh, liquid liquid based.
I like that idea, and so to not kind of specify it a bit more, I would like to play with the combining it with the panel, um, the LOINC description somehow, so that it's collection of a specimen for a specific purpose, but it doesn't necessarily have to explicitly say what type of lab testing is going to be done, other than to either locate HPV virus or um, cytology at some point. I
And
can.
I know you can override it at the Norway level, but I know that we want to try to avoid pre-coordinating the procedure with the reason for the procedure. So doing the X for the collection for would be doing that. So I was trying to steer a little bit away from that, but if it works for the situation, we may not be able to avoid it.
It could be useful for international use to be more generic and say it's just a specimen collection and specify from where and what type of specimen we're
Mhm,
actually collecting,
mhm.
so that at least we have that in common. And then we might overwrite the international guidelines to be able to deliver this concept as a billable concept for them
Yep,
nationally. Yeah.
that makes sense.
Mm.
Okay.
Sounds really good to me. Thank you guys. I'm gonna copy the many useful comments in the chat as well.
I'm
And
not
we'll
sure
keep
you can copy it from the chat, but I will paste what's in the chat into the notes later.
Yeah, we
Because I
can.
think our admin doesn't allow us to copy stuff out of the chat. It allows us to click on links in the chat to open them, but it
Okay,
doesn't allow us to copy out of the chat. But
that's
since I'm
perfect.
recording, I will get all the chat also. So I will make
Thank
sure
you.
you have the link to these minutes. And then
Perfect.
I
Thank
can share the recording with you also via email or some way. We'll figure it out.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for inviting me and using your time in this.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll
Thanks
hop
for
out.
bringing this up.
Yeah,
We
thank you
need
so
to
much.
we need to get into more detail like for fire usage here in the US because there's going to be some similar issues even though we're using LOINC for terminology and as I put in the chat and Ricky kind of alluded to, we have one of the major vendors that's a global vendor that has kind of basically decided in fire they're going to make lab orders use fire procedure and then SNOMED procedure codes. It looks like even though LOINC is required in the US, so that's there's a huge misunderstanding of what is a procedure and the notions, and then it
Hmm.
impacts the modeling as you're talking about here, and then also how it's exchanged within HL7, etc. So it's important to kind of start at the foundation to make sure everyone's talking the same
Hmm.
thing, definition. So that's why getting back to kind of the origination of and understanding the situations is really helpful too. So thank you for
Thank you so much. All right, you guys have a
Okay.
good morning, afternoon, day, wherever you are.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you.
Bye,
Goodbye.
Hannah. Okay. Um,
Which major EHR vendor is this?
we're recording this.
I'll just say it's the one in my backyard, Nancy, if that gives you enough information to show. And we're trying to have conversations, and thank you, Ricky, for making the JIRAs to hopefully get that better guidance in HL7.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's their claim is, oh, it doesn't say you can't do this.
Yeah.
Oh,
That hopefully will get resolved. I'm
Yeah,
hoping.
that's a different discussion. Okay. So we got Nancy and Manjula. We have 20 minutes. Where do we want to go? Do we want to talk NHSN and just figure out where we are with that and what the next steps are and um, or do we want to talk about the cross-mapping table questions you raised, Manjula? And if either of you are talking, you're on mute.
well, Manjula, why don't we go ahead with yours?
Oh, okay. I think the important one that I wanted to raise is Ricky. I know you're aware of the fact that ONC is rolling out at some point in the future, is rolling out a terminology service that has um, values value sets. And during the presentation, Carmela mentioned about the specimen cross-mapping table, and it would be nice to incorporate that into that. That was a pleasant surprise because she specifically mentioned that, and it seems this terminology service is based on Medical. It seems to be running Medical in the back end.
Mhm.
So I did tell her that the specimen cross-mapping table is available on a different instance of Medical at the APHL instance. So it may be just, incorporating or kind of transporting that, whatever the word is, from that to their instance. So it may be an opportunity to make it available to a lot of people through that effort, because I believe there won't be a lot of things to be done because it's the same system. So from this medical instance to that medical instance. So hopefully, if we can make this happen, most of that information that's already there in the APHL medical instance related to the cross-mapping table can be transported into the ONC's version, make it available through that. So I think that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, so this is the email Carmela sent me a while back, and we just haven't had a chance to talk about it since April. So, but these are the four options she had pointed out, and to me, since this is coming out now, this is really, and the decisions yet, maybe may have changed since April, obviously. But yeah, if ONC could put it out as part of their terminology services, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that kind of solves the hosting problem too. I mean, that we were like looking at where we could put it, and I think if we were like thinking of, okay, we have this inside medical, can we make it open to other people to access? If this happens, like this is an ONC was like saying this is available through an API. You don't even need a user ID. This is publicly available. It can be polled. It's basically pretty open. So I think if we can make this happen, we basically solve the hosting problem. So or the hosting requirement that we were discussing for quite a while. So I think that's a good opportunity that we should like take. We should start pursuing. I see Andrea's hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, I was just curious. It looks like you have several options, which is good. And if you're landing on one of the ones with the APIs or Fire, and given that laboratories don't have Fire functionality, access, or experience, that could be a major blocker for them accessing this. And so I'm just kind of curious. I mean, I don't have a problem with the hosting options. It's just making sure that it can be downloaded, used in their systems, either, kind of. So I'm just kind of curious, are they going to be able to potentially download a spreadsheet if they need to? I know it's kind of more old school, but if that's the capabilities that they have, or can they cut and paste from, is there going to be some type of searchable portal that they can search for the terms and cut and paste into their system? What types of things are you anticipating so there's no blockers for accessibility to use this content? Because if they can't access it, then the work isn't going to be for naught, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we need
Yeah.
to
So
consider non-API access too, but
And I'll just say, like, one of the things, like with Link, I know they just updated some things, but like when they went to their website search away from Realma, we've encountered those issues as well. Um, it's okay that they have like the web browser. I mean, that's good. Some people use that. Um, can The other thing is, can people upload any like data dictionaries potentially map directly within? I don't think you're having any type of mapping service, let's put it that way, or capabilities. So if you're not bringing the data to the data set, you need to be able to bring the data set to like the terms that are going to be mapped to SNOMED. Because you're not going to use SNOMED instead of, you have to have the mapping to SNOMED for lab data. And I know that's something that a lot of people in informatics don't realize, especially on the EHR side, because they're used to having like the fire hose of just consuming like all of ARC's norm or all ICD codes and letting the clinician decide. And lab is quite different implementation aspects. So because of the validation and some of the things related to CLIA too. So it's just understanding how it's used and so it can be usable.
So something that I think Kamala shared was that as far as I have to go back and look at the meeting notes. But I think she mentioned that there's a website to access it. I cannot explicitly remember if there's a downloadable though. I had to look it up. But there is a website that allows you to browse um, the content. It's not only it's not an API only product. There's a website behind it. I'm hoping that's
Yeah,
downloadable.
I'm just not sure if the content model can be properly rendered in that viewpoint at the moment. That might be, needed development on the medical clinical architecture side to render the content model piece of it, right? It's one thing to find a concept. It's a different thing to find all the or visualize all the relationships between those concepts
Mhm.
properly, right? So,
Yeah, that's a discussion to have, I guess.
yeah. Um,
But I think it's good if we start that discussion so that we can identify what needs to be done so that we can start that transition if and understand whether we need to do either maybe a lot of work or maybe less work depending on what needs to be done to make that transition from
yeah. I
what
mean
the format we have to the format they need.
yeah, I mean what this statement that it's based on Fire R4 is what's worrying me a little bit for the API piece of it because concept map, as you know, changed a lot. So
Mhm.
I don't know that the R4 if the R4 version can do what we need it to do to represent this content model.
Yeah.
I haven't played with it. I don't know. So if that's something you might want to try out to see if a Fire R4 concept map can do what we want to do.
Okay. Yeah.
It might be good.
Um,
It might be good too to list out some scenarios for testing. So if you're just looking up on a website, can you find things in like the relationships like you're talking about, Ricky? Because that's another key piece of it. So like just searching on the website, and you're not downloading or copying any content, then if you're trying to copy content because you're looking for the codes you need in your LIS or EHR, can you cut and paste and map it into your, like your vendor system into their fields for mapping purposes to use the content? And then if you're like a terminology vendor, an EHR, LIS vendor, the question is they probably still are not going to download this instead of their SNOMED downloads, right? Because they need this additional SNOMED codes that are not in here, like organisms and qualifier values. So you have to think about how is the vendor going to use this if they're downloading the full SNOMED release and doing the updates, because I mean, there might be some folks that might want to download the whole content for, on their local system or for lookup or whatever locally if they don't have internet access or something. So I would kind of list the scenarios, put your requirements down to make sure that you're meeting everything that your end user needs, and then go back and look like how you're going to meet those requirements with the options you have. And it should be pretty clear, if there's any blockers. Because there might be other ones we haven't even thought of or discussed as you go through that testing of the process and workflow, how you intend to use it. Like you might need this feature or that feature, and you can list that into the specifications and requirements.
And I think the API is for downloading, if I'm understanding right. I did ask the question, is that like access limitations, stuff like that. It seems like the access limitations are pretty high, but I think it does have certain limitations. So it's not like for like live or runtime access. It seems to be for like, you access it frequently for updating your internal value sets, but you don't do it as a runtime thing, as a live thing.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we certainly can, SciMedical certainly can create Excel exports from the data. So, you know, one thing is to have it in, you know, available potentially in the SciMedical instance via API, but also on a hosted on a web page, you know, where the versions are the same. So you create a spreadsheet copy whenever you're updating your SciMedical concept map. So I think that should be doable. I'm not so worried about the download format. It might take a little bit to get it just right, to come out, you know, just right. But um but I know that we can do that because we're doing it for Livet. We're using a content model for Livet and for the Livet maintenance. And we're distributing it as spreadsheets. So um so I think that part I'm not so worried about. And Andrea, it's just then you know, a different place potentially where they have to go, but that would be the case. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really important too, like from product management to know, I was having this discussion with something else earlier this week, but like what your customers actually need versus what you think they need
yeah,
to make sure that, you know, for usability testing, because like I said, there's such a great resource. And so you want to make sure that folks can actually use it and there's not any blockers for the use based on, so it might be good too to get some, you know, early adopters to test it out too and identify some other things, like I said, that might be
yeah,
needed. It
yeah.
might be
I
as
mean,
simple as how to search, you know, you put in a term, can you check whether it's a specimen type in like a checkbox or a source site? And you might want to have some information about the distinctions because those are most commonly confused across laboratory medicine and even clinicians. Talking about clinician training, it gets confused and then they're mapping the incorrect codes. And I've worked with customers where then they're failing their ELR from public health because they're like, no, this is the wrong code that you need. You need to go back and fix it. And I think Aaron Holt even said when we are in the LIC, the most common issue is the terminology for
yeah,
ELR.
yeah,
So we're trying to make it easy for them.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to drop y'all.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting
Same
close to
here.
the next call. Um, okay, so I think next steps, let me just write these down. Manjula, you're gonna see FireArk 4
Yeah.
can handle the, it's not extensions, but the property.
Yeah,
Um,
the
I think
specimen cost
it's
mapping.
property. What? Yeah, I think it's handled in concept map dot property or something.
Yeah.
And then um, uh, I can write out the use cases and I can uh, Excel format. I'm pretty sure they can, but um, okay. So we'll bring that back next week. And then next week we could focus on the blood cultures if you want, Nancy. And
Yes, I'd love it.
okay, and then maybe also chat a bit more about the Carius link code. But I have to digest all the stuff you sent already, Andreas. I'm still not quite there. So but so for I think those would be the next steps. All right. Have a good one, everybody.
Okay, you
See you
too.
next week.
Okie doke. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.